The first chapter in the book's about self, and one of the tests you mentioned, the Myers-Briggs test. I've done that. I'm an INFP, or borderline J. Why do you think it's so important for people to, do these things and get to know their personality types?
Because I don't think we do it, and I don't think people focus enough on their self in everyday life, even from a young age, right? You're taught almost to disregard yourself. I think culture as well, social media. It's like, I mean, I know myself when I was a kid, I was quite shy and I was concerned what other people thought and whatever. And I just think it's really important, and the earlier the better, to kind of understand, that Myers-Briggs one's, the Myers-Briggs one does it really well in explaining quite simply, like, where you are in a personality type. But I think it's super important that people or kids or whatever get onto that as early as possible, so that you do understand that you work differently to everyone else, right? The way you work is completely different to the way I work, and there's no right or wrong. They're both equally great in their own characteristics and ways. But I think understanding those characteristics and ways are, super important for how you see you fit in the world, and what you want to put energy into career wise, or whatever you do in the future.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned as well, that I picked up on, is this idea of imposter syndrome, which I think is a massive problem. For myself, when I first started this podcast, I had it dreadfully. I remember the first few interviews I did, I sucked. Like, I was terrible, because I was speaking. I think the first interview I ever did was with a woman who's a director at Nike, and it's a pretty big position to hold. And I'd never really done interviews before, and I just I was thinking to myself, like, I don't deserve to be doing this. And I was just very shy in the interview, and everything she said, I sort of just took as gospel. I never challenged her on anything. And I just think back to them, and I had this very bad imposter syndrome at the time. So how do you think it's best to tackle imposter syndrome and deal with it?
It's probably just like what you did, right?
Yeah.
Just keep doing it and keep doing it. And do you know what? Like, do you still get imposter syndrome now?
I mean, not nowhere near as bad. There'll be like one or two. Will there be something completely out of my field? I mean, I did an episode like a few weeks ago, and I ended up talking about politics, and I sort of had it then, but for the majority, no.
Yeah, see, like, I still get it now, but like, it's like it's I don't know. We all started in the same place, right?
Yeah.
And I speak to some people like now that are at the best of the game in whatever sport or business that they do, and it's so, like, the imposter syndrome thing is so common in people that people would deem as high achievers, or people that have succeeded. And to be honest, I think it keeps you quite humble. Like, I always just see myself still as this kid from Preston, and I feel like there's this thing inside of me that's probably still that kid in Preston, but I'm trying to get not away from that kid in Preston, but like as far away from that useless kid in Preston, and try and make, try and succeed in whatever I do. But that imposter syndrome follows you around regardless. I think, it comes down to choice, and it comes down to, you have the choice to get away from that imposter syndrome, and you do it by just throwing yourself into these situations that, that seem difficult or seem unachievable. And the higher up you go, or the more along the path you go of throwing yourself into those difficult situations, that imposter syndrome almost levels up as well, right?
Yeah.
And what you used to get imposter syndrome for, now you don't.
Yeah.
And now you get imposter syndrome in different scenarios and situations.
Yeah.
I guess,
sure.
It's all down to exposure, right?
Yeah. I mean, a few weeks ago, I was talking to a man called Brett Weinstein, he's a sort of
that.
You saw that? Yeah. Okay. So when I was getting ready for that interview, I was going through some of his materials online, and like a lot of it was just going over the top of my head. And I was thinking,
he's super intelligent, right?
Dude, it's unbelievable. Like, I don't think I've ever spoken to someone who's so into. I mean, I had to listen to the podcast back 5 times before I really understood what he was saying to me.
Yeah.
So I just remember thinking, I was sat there across from him and he was talking about all these things. And I just remember thinking this whole thing started for me. I started this podcast recording myself and my friend on an iPhone in Tesco car park at like 1 o'clock in the morning. And that's my only credentials to be, you know, up to this point. And I just remember thinking, you know, what the fuck am I doing talking to this guy?
Yeah.
But
you've grafted, you've put the hard work in.
Yeah. I feel like,
and it's like, people, you know, that's another thing, people don't see that and just see like a successful podcast speaking to, you know, various characters around the world. But yeah, like it's important to know that that's where it started, Tesco's car park.
Yeah, Tesco's car park. And you know, you have to make a decision as well. You can let that define you, and that's all you see yourself as. But you know, there's got to come a point where you have a bit of courage to say that, you know, unless you do put yourself in these situations, it's never gonna really go away, that imposter syndrome.
Yeah, true. And yeah, and it's, I don't know, you've probably seen it as well. It's like the more times you throw yourself into these situations, it's like that personal growth, isn't it? Like you either see that it wasn't as bad as what you thought it would be.
Yeah.
Because like the build-up's always worse than the actual action.
For sure.
Like I always find, like, even, you know, waiting around to do an interview, or I don't know, whatever it is that you're getting nervous about, like even back in the military, right? Take parachuting, for example, like waiting around to do a night jump, you know, you don't, after a while you don't get nervous, but like the nerves are just sat there, but you've found a way to just cover them up. Yeah. But you know they're there because no one likes night jumping. And then literally it's like the build up is quite a long drawn out process, putting on the kit, like walking out to the plane, receiving a brief, sitting on the plane on oxygen or off oxygen. And then there's like a 5 minute, a 2 minute and a 1 minute count where you stand up, put your kit on, like walk to it, you know, the back of the plane drops down and you're looking into the black abyss. And like, this is the time when you're just like in your head, just going through, right, okay, you do a few like dummy pulls and stuff like that. And you're like, get out, get stable, pull, right, turn right. And then it's almost like that moment where someone puts a thumb in front of your face and you go, like all that just disappears. It's the same in everything else, or I find it's the same in everything else. It's that build up and apprehension is so much worse than when you actually start something and completely forget about all that build up and anxiety and you get into the flow.